Cohesity partners up for security. GenAI has some app issues. Eutelsat forgot about leap years. AWS exposes web apps. JavaScript wars. IT exodus on tap. And we look at some new AI restrictions from the government and the responses to them in this episode of the Gestalt IT Rundown. Happy Wednesday, everyone. It is January 15th. Welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown. And we hope that you are wearing your favorite chapeau today because it is National Hat Day. I am Tom Hollingsworth. I am not wearing a hat because, it'd look weird on the recording, but I do promise to go out and have some strawberry ice cream today because it's also National Strawberry Ice Cream Day, oddly specific. Joining me, of course, is one of my favorite co-hosts, Mr. Alistair Cook. Al, welcome to the Rundown.
It is a pleasure to be back here, and I also am a man without a hat. However, it is National Bagel Day, and I did have a bagel for my breakfast this morning with some beautiful pastrami and an egg in it.
Awesome. Well, that's good to hear. We're trying to fuel you up with some of the great news that's going on, and we're trying to make sure that everybody's on top of the things that are happening. So, Al, I'm going to let you kick it off with the first story.
So, Cohesity is boosting their cyber event response team. That service, and they're adding additional partners to this. The goal is to help customers get rolling on starting incident response as soon as possible when it's detected. The new partners include Palo Alto's Unit 42, Arctic Wolf, Sophos, Phoenix 24, and Semperis. The CERT can automatically upload logs and reports to these partners to respond to attacks as quickly as possible, to prevent further damage and to contain the spread of malicious software. Now that CERT is included as a part of the Cohesity subscription, Tom, can you see this being a really fundamental part of how people are managing some of these particularly ransomware threats?
I absolutely can, and I will applaud Cohesity here for not putting out a half-baked incident response solution and calling it a day. They are going out and they are partnering with companies that offer this already. Unit 42 is one of the best in the business. Talking about Arctic Wolf, which is a company that I've talked to in the past, and even Sophos. I mean, Sophos has some legendary researchers. And when it comes to incident response, you need to start the clock as soon as you know that you've been breached. And there is a lag time, right? Because we have to upload the logs and we have to collect the information from the unit. We have to do this, we have to do that. And the entire time that you're trying to start your incident's response, you're also trying to respond to that incident and get your business continuity plan in place. Well, when it comes to using a data protection company like Cohesity to do that, you can do both of those things at the same time. So you can start the clock on incident response and make sure you're collecting the data that you need to do your reporting at the end of this. But you can also make sure that you're containing those people from getting anywhere else. Super critical when it comes to these kinds of things, just because if you don't do that, you are going to have a world of trouble later on down the road. And in the linked article from Blocks and Files, they talk about the fact that this actually happened, that they were able to instantly kick off an incident response situation, and they were able to contain the attacker fairly quickly before any more damage could be done. So I'm glad to see that Cohesity understands that data protection is a growing part of security, but it is not the only thing in security, and that there are still people out there that we really need to work with, and we need to continue to build on those relationships because it's really a team effort. AI-enabled applications are the only way that companies are going to get back money invested in building generative AI models and all of that supporting infrastructure that we've been hearing so much about. The problem is that an IBM study revealed that AI expertise in software developers is a long way behind that same expertise in data scientists. Developers are finding that there is a steep learning curve to understanding AI application development and a lack of end-to-end tools, which is leading developers needing to learn about a dozen new tools to build that first use case. Is there hope for AI application development to be a core feature in a development tool, or are we going to have to rely on AI to write all those tools for us, Al?
Well, I think it's interesting to see that we on Tech Field Day events, particularly AI Field Day and Cloud Field Day events, have seen quick demo builds of generative AI applications, typically using retrieval augmented generation RAG. And I've even done one of those myself with Dell earlier, and about this time last year. And these proof of concepts, this ability to show some value happens really fast, but they typically just hit a single use case, a single API call essentially inside an application. And applications are built with hundreds of these API calls, and each use case has to be built behind them. And that's really where the challenge seems to be. Getting developers to understand that crossover from the data scientists who know where to find the data and what to do with it to get some of these proofs out, to building applications that can use those insights and can automatically build those insights themselves. And we definitely see that at the moment, here's a collection of tools that you can cobble together yourself as a developer to build some solution. And this is evidenced by often we see Jupyter notebooks as the way that people are demonstrating their applications. That's a good tool for a data scientist. It's a terrible tool for building an application. And so there is still this gulf between the sort of leading edge researchy side, proof points that we're getting out of the data scientist side to actually delivering some business value, making applications that transform your business. It's not to say it isn't happening. There are absolutely a whole lot of companies who are getting business value out of using generative AI, but it's a hard road to get there. And what we will see, I think, over time is that those plethora of additional tools will get wrapped up into development environments, and wizard-driven mechanisms will be built around them. But then, as you say, we may see that generative AI is going to build the generative AI applications, which seems a little recursive and therefore probably true. And we've seen this from a number of vendors. In particular, Google was talking about having 30% of the code that's generated being generated by AI tools and accepted by a human who is mediating the AI tool. So maybe we'll start to see AI applications being written by AIs, but who's going to write the AI application to write the AI application? Is that another AI that's going to build? Yeah, watch the space. It's going to be pretty hard. And as we've seen, there's been a huge investment in all of these tools. We need to see some business value being delivered back by the tools. Launching rockets is hard. You might call it rocket science. And so is remembering what day it is, particularly as it seems like Groundhog Day some of the time. Eutelsat is a company that operates a fleet of 35 geostationary satellites called OneWeb that provides services to customers such as the Hughes network systems. They also run a network of low Earth orbit satellites. And on December 31st, they had an outage that affected these low Earth orbit satellites. The reason? It was a bug in the receiving station. So it was a ground station bug. It wasn't even a bug in the satellites. That didn't realize that 2024 was a leap year. So by the time they'd counted through the days in 2024, they thought it was 2025 already on December 31st. Eutelsat worked to get the systems back online. However, 4 of the gateways are still not operational, and they're not expected to be operational for months, mid-2025. The life expectancy of their first satellites is also coming to its end in 2026, and the company is expected to launch a large constellation soon to replace the ones that are expected to power down. Is this use of satellite internet, and particularly low Earth orbit satellite internet, going to bring us more of these problems, or is it just that we're not good at IT, Tom?
Well, leap years are not hard. I will give everybody an out on the year 2000 because only years that are divisible by 400 are leap years. And that was the first leap year we'd had since we moved to the Gregorian calendar on a century mark. It's the every 4 years part, unless it's 00, that bothers me. Because, I'd buy it in 2004. I'd buy it in 2104. You had one of these 4 years ago, guys. Like this should not be a big deal. But, as you said, the problem wasn't on February 29th. The problem was when 365 days had elapsed and the satellite's obviously it's got to be 2025, right? So this was a 2-day outage, except for those base stations, which they haven't been able to update yet. I know that a lot of people are becoming more reliant on satellite communications. I've talked this week about things like your iPhone being able to send emergency messages, and now even just regular messages, which is really handy if you're stuck in the backcountry, you're in an area where cell coverage is bad. I don't know if you're affected by the fires in Southern California or a hurricane in North Carolina, that's a big deal, right? And we're even seeing, in the case of the wildfires in Southern California, where companies like Starlink are going to go out and deploy Starlink terminals to people to be able to communicate and use the internet while they're down. And that assumes that your satellites are in orbit and they're going to work properly. And then you find out that there's a bug, and the bug is something stupid, like we don't know how to count to 366 every 4 years. So as satellite communication becomes more and more a part of our everyday lives, whether we're using things like a Garmin InReach or an iPhone, or in some cases, like especially in rural areas, HughesNet is their only satellite internet capability. You've got to be able to create reliable infrastructure. And I'll tell you why that's important for a company like Eutelsat. Because if you don't, somebody's going to come along and they're going to run you out of business because they can create reliable infrastructure. And you know that's going to be a selling point for Starlink. You know that's going to be a selling point for Project Kuiper when they're finally able to launch that Blue Origin rocket. And Global Star, which is a company that Apple's partnered with. So if you want to continue to be able to do this and you want to have the ability to replace those satellites again, you better get it right. The shared responsibility security model in AWS means that customers are free to misconfigure how they use services and cause themselves a whole world of problems. It seems that a few customers were unintentionally using all of that freedom with an application load balancer, and that led to a security bypass and unintended information disclosure, everybody's favorite kind of disclosure. AWS realized that they need to do a better job of describing that security configuration, as we have learned over the years with things like OpenS3 buckets. But I guess the question, Al, is what went wrong? And when it's a shared model, does that mean that we all share the responsibility for screwing up?
Well, the story came to us that it was about application load balancers, and these are the smart load balancers in AWS that can look at a request and route it to different places and can integrate authentication. And it was that integration of third-party authentication that apparently was the easy to misconfigure part. And if customers misconfigured that authentication, and of course you build an authentication into the bit where you're controlling access to private data. Well, if you'd misconfigured that on your application load balancer, that private data could be exposed, or malicious third parties could get in without actually following the security, following the authentication. So it's a pretty significant potential issue in here. And this is where I have some challenges around the shared responsibility model that AWS has. And AWS can say, we provided the application load balancer. It's perfectly secure. It does exactly what it says on the tin. It won't expose you to a risk that another customer of AWS or AWS themselves will do something wrong and expose your data. But the shared responsibility model says you're welcome to do what you want to with this tool. You can leave the security as lax as you want and as open as you want, or you can tighten it as much as you want, but you're responsible for knowing the right level of security and control in there. And those principles are a little bit interesting because they give AWS a bit of a slopey shoulder thing of, yeah, you're holding the phone wrong, right? You misconfigured. And my response to that is when it's one or two customers that are misconfiguring something, it's probably the customer's faults. But when this becomes a frequent thing, when the same misconfiguration becomes common, then it's a systematic fault from the vendor. And that's, in this case, AWS chose to address it by changing their documentation, not by changing feature set. And they'll probably change some user interface components later on as well. But at this stage, it's just update of some documentation, making it clearer what the best practices are. And I kind of get that. I like that there's been an update to the documentation, so people building a new system who read the documentation will get the best practice recommendations. But what about the people who've built according to the best practice recommendations, or whatever the recommendations appeared to be for the last, application load balancer has been around for over 10 years. Are they potentially at risk, and how do they identify? This is where maybe a little more effort from AWS would have helped out to identify affected customers, notify them, or potentially have something like a AWS config service check that's automatically enabled and notifies if there's a misconfiguration. So shared responsibility is interesting. It should mean that there's a mutuality of responsibility in there too. Now it's time for the legal corner of the rundown. This week, Oracle refused to voluntarily release the trademark on JavaScript, which means that the case is actually going to have to go to court. Oracle has claimed a trademark on the term since they purchased what was left of Sun Microsystems and all of the Java components that Sun had at the time. But The current provider of JavaScript is an organization, a company called Dinoland. And they'd asked that Oracle abandon their unused trademark and made it much easier for other people, other organizations to use the word JavaScript without having any potential legal repercussions on them. Oracle tried to file a renewal back in 2019, but apparently they used screen captures from Dinoland's site or from the Node.js website that has nothing to do with Oracle, isn't maintained or operated by Oracle. That's a strange way to prove that you still own something, is showing that somebody else has it. The trial process is expected to go on for the rest of this year, unless a settlement can be reached. Is it going to be a 1 year, or is this going to be one of those years and years of trademark battles on?
Oh, this is going to take a while. If you'll excuse me, I need to go get some sandwich cookies and some facial tissues and possibly sew some hook and loop on my thing to be able to stick patches to it. And if it feels weird about me saying things like that instead of Oreos, Kleenex, and Velcro, you understand why we're in this situation. It's the heart of what we're talking about. So for those of you who are not familiar with this, things are trademarked, right? That's not a copyright. So like the example was last year, Mickey Mouse, specifically Steamboat Willie, went into the public domain, which means you can say the word Mickey next to the word mouse and not get sued for it. And you can even create a Mickey Mouse cartoon in the style of Steamboat Willie. But if you try to draw a picture of a mouse with red underpants that looks suspiciously similar to the one that you see everywhere, you're going to get sued because that's not copyrighted, that's trademarked. And trademarks can be extended basically forever, but they basically have to have a likeness or a specific kind of use or something like that, which is one of the reasons why if you watch a lot of YouTube, like the people who make Velcro actually get really mad when you refer to anything that's generically hook and loop attachments as that, unless it is Velcro, because when you use the term too much, it becomes a genericized trademark. And that means that the company really can't use it anymore because the common parlance of using that term means that you can't make any money off of it because nobody's going to license that name. Well, that's the problem that you're running into with JavaScript right now, is that it was created by Sun Microsystems and it was used. And just so we're clear, JavaScript is not Java. It is a programming language used on the web that is not, and it doesn't have anything to do with Java other than the name. And we know why they called it JavaScript. It's because at the time Java was huge and they were trying to get in on that. Well, fast forward to today, Oracle owns what's left of Sun Microsystems, and they have the trademark on this. But there are other products that are being used, like Node.js is a perfectly good example, that have nothing to do with Oracle. The problem is in that .js at the end of it, because if you say JavaScript, Oracle could potentially sue you and have your product shut down because it includes trademarked IP. And the folks at Dinoland were basically like, what if we didn't do that? Like, abandon the trademark because you're not using it. We are. And we won't take you to court to get the trademark from you. And of course, supervillain Larry Ellison decided, no, I don't want to do that. I want to fight you in court. And court takes forever. Like the arguments. So just to give you an idea of where we are in the legal saga, they haven't even started discovery yet, right? That's expected to start maybe in March. We might go to trial in November. And even then, in the current court docket, there is an opportunity for Oracle to file a response for arguments all the way out in summer of 26. This is not going to go quickly. But what happens is that it kind of puts this weird pallor on everything, because if they are eventually found to have the rights to the trademark, they being Oracle, anything that's done between now and then could be subject to removal. Because it's a retroactive, well, you guys knew you shouldn't have done this, so you did it anyway. I'm in a weird spot on this because I am very anti-patent troll, and this is not a patent or a copyright case, so I want to be clear. But I'm against people doing things for reasons that they shouldn't, but I'm also against people holding on to crap that they need to get rid of, that they have no use for, because on the off chance that they might license it one day, they want to make some money. I think that the best solution here is for Oracle to maybe see the handwriting on the wall and gift the trademark to Dino Land and just kind of let this one go and pretend that you didn't get confused and think that this was Java that you could license to people. Right? It may feel like that everyone in tech is trying to look for a new job right now. And you're not wrong, because according to the career site Dice, 47% of the people that responded to a survey said that they are actively looking for new roles. Now, some of the stated reasons include your typical reduced benefits, meager salary increases, unless you're working on AI, and even less flexibility in work locations, such as being able to work remotely. Of the people that responded, an additional 36% said that they got a merit raise last year, which is actually down from 41% the year before. And a lot of others noted that companies are starting to cut back on things like offering training and education as one of those perks of the job. And overall, it seems like the tech industry is maybe starting to tighten the belt a little bit, as some of those promises of AI being right around the corner to write the tools and do all the work of these people who are looking for new jobs might have an impact on the job market. Al, does this bode ill for companies that are trying to hire good IT workers when everyone's looking for a job and the only hope is, well, maybe AI won't be able to take this one?
Well, I think you've sort of brought a couple of things together there. One of them is there are still companies looking to hire good IT people, good people who are working in the industry. And those people are going to be overwhelmed with a number of applications from staff who are just looking for somewhere else. But I think what we'll also see is that those new jobs have the same restrictions. We're in the same market. We're in a pretty tight economy at the moment. There is a feeling of concern about what the future brings, and there have been a lot of redundancies through parts of the IT industry, as there are every year. And so, yeah, there's some challenges around this reduction in benefits, the general tightness in market at the moment, outside of some of the big name AI kind of places. But then there is still that concern that maybe my job's going to go away because of AI, or maybe the employers aren't going to hire because AI is doing the job for us. And we're seeing that in other industries. We're seeing that particularly in the media industry. There's been a shift towards AI-generated content, and that naturally means that there's less jobs for people that aren't in AI. In terms of the looking for new employment, it's a really common story, particularly return to office seems to be a way that companies are letting their staff know that they no longer have the upper hand the way they did during the pandemic and the years following. So, yeah, it's definitely something we're seeing of a lot of people looking for new positions, and that the offers that are available aren't necessarily the offers that were available 2 years ago. I found it interesting that so many people are actually getting merit-based increases in salary. Although it's a decrease from last year, it's maybe I just never do something meritorious, because in my employment history, there's been almost no cases where I've had merit-based increases. In fact, the joke amongst the engineers that I've worked with here in New Zealand at solutions companies was the way to get promoted was to go and work for a different solutions company. My own approach was to go overseas and work overseas for a few years to move forward, but almost nobody seemed to get promoted in place within the organizations I worked with. So it's actually quite nice to see that people are getting merit-based promotions and increases in income.
We had a story that we wanted to take a closer look at because it is creating some ripples in the industry. And of course, it's about AI, and it has to do with the Biden presidential administration, because while it might be winding down, there are some things that are going to be making the news. Yesterday, the president proposed a new framework for the export of chips used in developing AI. The rules seek to limit export of the chips to some 120 countries, including Mexico, Israel, and Switzerland. The rules appear to be aimed at protecting U.S. national security interests, and if you read between the lines in the order, they're aimed at China. The administration says that this ruling is designed to close some of the loopholes that are in currently existing chip export restrictions. Now, I found out about this because I got an email from the folks over in NVIDIA, and they released a statement calling the rules, and I quote, misguided, due to the fact that they would impact what is now the largest AI hardware company in the world and could potentially impact shipments of hardware and even development of software models. Al, where do we even begin to unpack all of this?
Well, I think one of the first elements to look at is what are the risks here? What are these regulations, the existing regulations, these new regulations about? And they're about controlling access as much as possible, or at least making it difficult for an enemy state in particular, but any kind of hostile actor against the United States interests from building advanced technology. And these rules have been around for a long time. If you go back into the last century, there was restrictions on the export of encryption software to the extent that the software PGP was printed out into hard copy, because hard copy is not restricted, taken somewhere else and retyped in outside of the United States so it could be distributed without US protections preventing it, without requiring a letter from the Department of Defense saying you're allowed to export this encryption software. So there's a long history of controlling access to technology and trying to keep US technology looking after US interests alone. And that's essentially a continuation of what's going on here. But what we're seeing is that the current regulations are very leaky. We're seeing things like technology getting into Iranian manufactured drones from US hardware vendors. And this is the sort of place where there's some information or some technology that shouldn't be arriving at these less friendly states that is getting there. And these rules are trying to reduce that. And it seems that some of this is that there are some states where the technology is allowed to be exported to, and those countries are exporting onwards, which is probably not what was intended. I think there's some interesting stuff here in the NVIDIA response. It was pretty pointedly political. It twice mentioned that the Trump administration, the previous and the future Trump administration, were very pro-business, and these kinds of restrictions on business were going to have no place with the Trump administration, whilst NVIDIA then specifically said that the Biden administration was bringing in this 200-page misguided document. And I started reading those 200 pages and decided I really have better things to do with my time than read through all of that government procedural stuff. I'm sure there are other people who enjoy it more than I do. But yeah, that response that was highly politically oriented, not oriented towards what are the risks here and is this a sensible step to respond to those risks, I found very interesting. There's also been some other coverage about the fact that it's not actually going to be the Biden government who implements this. And so maybe this is just a storm in a teacup, because of course this order takes 120 days of gazetting, of publication, before it can actually be put in effect. And long before that happens, it isn't going to be a Biden government anymore. So is this really just a bit of noise? Will we see this just die away in a week's time, Tom?
I mean, we could, but it won't be Biden that kills it, right? And that's part of this kind of brinksmanship game. If you're not familiar with the tribalism of politics in the US, it is very common for administrations to propose rules they know are going to get shot down. It's not that they wanted the rule, it's that they wanted the other side to have to do something about it. And I'm going to avoid getting super political on this, but this is a situation where everybody agrees that there are certain actors out there that should not or really do not need access to AI. And they are unfriendly governments. So how do you fix that? Well, you put restrictions in place, right? And we've seen that over the course of 2024. And if you are a rundown listener, you know that. There have been restrictions in place about all kinds of crazy things, right? Like not just export restrictions on the chips themselves. Like there are export restrictions on the machines used to make the chips because they only come from like one company in the Netherlands, those lithography machines. But the problem is that enterprising governments that want to find a way around the restrictions will. And so what they were doing is they were buying these through shell companies, through other countries. And then they were having basically those components drop shipped into unfriendly countries. I mean, think about the way that the Russians are evading the massive amount of sanctions that have been placed on them for their behavior over the last couple of years. They're just routing some of their needs through other countries. So what do we do about it? Do we just ignore the fact that people are going around the restrictions? or do we try to put something in place? And then for those people who are saying, well, why did he wait until he's literally going to be out of office in a week to do that? When would have been the best time? The day he got into office? Well, we didn't know there was a problem back then. That was 4 years ago, and AI wasn't a thing. Should he have waited till the day before he left office, knowing that it wouldn't get implemented? I don't know. Maybe this was just an attempt to say, I tried to do something, and if the other guy undoes it, then that's on him. I also know that NVIDIA hit really, really hard on this. In fact, if you Google the headlines and you talk about AI restrictions in NVIDIA, some of the lead writers, they were working overtime with the thesaurus, blasted, dragged, you name it. Blasted's probably a little bit overused anymore. But yeah, NVIDIA has the most to lose from this, right? Because they are the hardware manufacturer until companies like Intel and AMD can really bring their facilities online. And this goes along with a lot of other things too, like certain closed learning models are no longer going to be available to be exported to certain places, and there's a lot of other things that go into it. It's not just about the hardware; it's just that NVIDIA is making the most noise about the hardware right now. And I can see their point, right? Why shouldn't we be able to sell to whoever we want to sell to? I would counter though that one of the things that we've seen over the last few years is that certain countries tend to like to reverse engineer high tech hardware and then just do it themselves. So if you want to sell to them, that's fine. I don't have a problem with it. Just remember that there was an attempt made so that if this goes sideways in a couple of years, you have nobody to blame but yourself for railing against something that you thought was a bad idea at the time.
Yeah, in terms of that stealing and reverse engineering, I remember that the digital equipment, the DEC engineers actually put on the silicon a notice saying digital for those who care enough to steal the very best, when the Soviet Union was reverse engineering PDP 1100 mini systems.
Well, the good news is that we have a lot of things coming up that you're not going to want to steal or miss, for that matter, because it is going to be a very busy couple of months for all of the events that we do at Tech Field Day. The first one is actually coming up in 2 weeks, and our partner in crime, Mr. Stephen Foskett, on January 29th and 30th, will be back in Silicon Valley for the first event of the year, which is AI Field Day 6. You're not going to want to miss a minute of that. He has some great companies coming up. And then in February, Al, you get to do one.
Well, Cloud Field Day 22. I'm trying to remember my numbers, which one we're up to. There's more than I've got fingers, so it's a little hard to count. Cloud Field Day 22 is February 19th and 20th. And it continues sort of a segue towards the hybrid cloud and multi-cloud as being an important part of what people are actually doing with clouds at Cloud Field Day. But before that, Tom, you're going to be in Europe.
I am. I'm going to be in Amsterdam for the next round of Cisco Live Europe. We are going to be getting some exciting presentations from the folks at Cisco, some new announcements that they're going to be coming out with. I am sure you're not going to want to miss it. You're probably going to need to stay up late or wake up early to be able to watch it, since we're going to be in Amsterdam, so we're going to be in Central European time. But hey, if you're one of our European folks, you get to watch it live for the first time in a while. And then in March, we're going to be kicking off the next edition of Networking Field Day. There's a lot of exciting conversations to be had around things like SD-WAN and AI network management. You're going to want to tune in for that. Just like you tune in every week for the Gestalt IT Rundown. We are very excited to be bringing you great content here in 2025. And don't forget that you can find us in a lot of different places. Of course, you can listen to us on our YouTube channel. Check out gestaltit.com for show notes and stories. You can listen to us in your favorite podcast application of choice. Just look for the Gestalt IT Rundown. And don't forget to check us on TechStrong TV as well as the Futurum Group, because we're going to be featured there as we go along in the year. And we are very excited to be bringing you more great stuff. And as you can tell, we're going to be rotating through our co-hosts every week. So, this week it's me and Al. Next week it could be Steven and Al. And you never know what excitement you're going to get. But we hope that you enjoy everything that we do for you and everything that we want to discuss with you. And don't forget to leave us a comment, or if you're listening to us as a podcast, a rating and review, because that always helps us figure out where to find the best new audiences. But until next week, we want to wish you a warm one. Make sure that you're bundled up and you are staying close by the news, because you never know when something exciting is going to happen. But when it does, we'll bring it to you on the Rundown.